Yeah, so we have Sonia here for whoever just joins. Yeah, you can maybe just give us a short introduction and then go into your topic.
Okay. Hi everyone. I don't see you anymore. I just see my presentation now on the screen. My name's Sonia. I'm an assistant professor at Eindhoven University at the Operations Planning, Accounting and Control group. I did my PhD at Wageningen University on, basically a rethinking of the food system, taking an operations research approach and kind of like, rethinking different aspects in the system and, solving decision problems in this. And today I hope to give you a bit of an overview of the current food system and the sustainable development in it. So I'll start. So basically, what is the food system or the food supply chain? Today's global food system is an intrinsic web of diverse supply chain activities. So it consists of many, many actors and interactions usually, and it can include a large variety of products, like basically everything that you get in the supermarket or like that you consume every day. It has to go somewhat through the food system. So there are different aspects that are involved in the system. So we have production activities, processing activities, distribution activities, and then, of course, consumption. So production mostly relates to agriculture, but there's also livestock systems and like farms and fisheries. That is part of that. Then processing can be, for example, packaging, cleaning of products, but it can also be value-adding processes. So that means, for example, turning flour into bread, making pizza, all these kind of things, like higher value products out of like basic ingredients. Distribution activities are mostly, it's changing, are mostly composed of transportation activities, storage activities, and then also, the activities that happen at the retailers and like sales activities. And then, consumption generally takes place at households, but also food services. And you're going to focus on consumption at the army. So basically, this is what a food chain may look like. It's a general representation of the chain, but it comes in many different shapes and sizes. So basically, first, the products have to be produced. So there's production, harvest, and collection activities. This is often agro-materials. These things are then further processed at like production plants. There may be actually several processing steps, and then they have to be distributed. This can happen through like a wholesaler, a retailer. It depends on the chain. Like your chain may have very specific requirements, and then it reaches the consumer, in this case, the military. Basically, the idea is that food supply chains can take many different shapes and sizes. So we can differentiate between like global versus local setups of the chain. So like products can come from very close by, but we can also, for example, imagine tomatoes coming from Spain or Italy, or other products coming from even further away. On the other hand, we can differentiate between animal versus plant-based chains, because animal chains often have further steps in between, because first we need to grow feed, then we have to feed that to the animals, then we have to slaughter them and so on, whereas plant-based chain might be shorter chains, for example. And then we can differentiate between non-perishable versus perishable foods. So for perishable foods, we often require cold chain technology in order to, well, ensure that the quality doesn't degrade very quickly. And then we can differentiate between processed versus non-processed foods, where like fruit and vegetables often, for example, this is really annoying, processed versus non-processed foods, where some vegetables are directly delivered from the farm and we can consume them, and other things have to be processed first. So there are more activities involved in that process. There are different types of cultivation that we can consider. So there's plant-based systems, for example. So that's can be greenhouses, arable farming, and orchards. And then in animal systems, we can differentiate, for example, between aquacultures and livestock system, which are, for example, cows and pigs and so on. With regards to the types of processing, we have primary processing, which is generally cutting, cleaning, and packaging of products, where food mostly retains its nutritional, physical, sensory, and chemical properties. And it's often necessary to ensure the food safety of these products. Whereas secondary processing is often depending on the type of product and can entail like physical processes such as milling, pressing, or dehydration of products, and chemical processes such as hydrogenation, hydrolysis, and fermentation. And this is often used to refine, purify, and transform primary food products to add value to them, and also maybe to extend the shelf life and delay deterioration, as it's often the case if we ferment things, for example. With regards to food distribution, we can, well, focus on two aspects here. First, distribution channels, which are often different between countries or between chains as well. So like, this might not be super relevant for you guys because, well, the chain has a clear customer. But yeah, there's like retail outlets, farmers markets, restaurants, and street food. Depending on the country, this may be different. And usually there's a difference between urban versus rural settings. So this is something important maybe also for you to take into account. Depending where your customers are, your distribution channel may be different. And the same again depends on like how long these like products have to travel. Like if this is we can supply them from local markets, it may be very different, the distribution channel, than if it comes from a global market. And again, depending on the channel, there is usually different regulations and standards for products and like that they have to, well, fulfill with regards to safety, quality, and other aspects. On the other hand, with regards to food distribution, we can look at transportation and handling, and that's often dependent on the available infrastructure. So what type of infrastructure do we have within a place? Like, is there roads that are making the place accessible, or do we have a port or an airport close by, or can we reach this place through railway and waterways? Then another important thing to consider here is the travel distances and the type of transportation mode, because that may impact like also like CO2 emissions and these kind of things, cost, fuel, and so on. And then we can consider the food handling technology and regulations in this context. So like, what type of technology do we have available? Is there machinery involved with which we can handle these like food products? Is there, do we need cold chain technology? Is there any regulation with regards to quality of product, safety of products that we need to ensure? Do we have to clean our trucks several times? And do we have to, I don't know, keep a certain temperature to make sure that the food is safe, for example. When we're talking about, well, food products, there's a couple of important factors to consider. And one of the most important that, well, we talk about is perishability and quality aspects. Like I've already mentioned it several times, like there may be certain regulations, food are perishable, they degrade over time. And if they are, like if they turn bad, there might be actually issues for our health. So it's very important to consider this. And then there are different product requirements that relate to, for example, where they are grown. So like they have specific requirements with regards to soil, water input, and so on. But they also like have requirements with regards to, well, recipes and inputs in terms of feed. If we're talking about like higher valued products, like animal products, they need feed inputs. If we have like pizza or whatever, that needs like a certain recipe and input from other products. Then there's climate and weather conditions that are important to consider within the context of food, because a lot of it is agricultural products, and like these products grow with like these, well, external inputs from the sun and water and rain. And then again, there's regulations with regards to products that they have to meet certain requirements. That may be quality standards, but it may also be other nutritional standards, or you are not allowed to use certain fertilizers or so on, depending on the country or the customer that you may have. We can here see that, like, well, products are coming from all over the place, and this is also important to know, and it relates to the product requirements, that usually we cannot grow everything everywhere. We can kind of like, well, push this a little bit, these boundaries, by growing things in greenhouses or kind of like adding additional water and irrigation systems and stuff like this. But in general, we have to keep in mind that these are agricultural products and they have specific requirements. And if we want something in particular, we may have to import it from another country. Another important factor to keep to take into account is seasonality. So while we can't grow products anywhere, we can't also grow them at just any time. Again, we can push these boundaries a little bit by growing things in greenhouses, but it's not necessarily feasible to grow everything in greenhouses. And again, like there are sustainability considerations if we're just like heating a greenhouse in winter to 30 degrees just because we want to have strawberries or so on. Another important factor to consider in this context of food is culture, because culture affects our eating habits and our dietary, well, preferences. So here you can see that like one of the main differences with regards to culture are, for example, different religions will look at different types of meat in a different way with regards to whether these types of meat are edible or not. And this also applies to other types of food. So basically, if you grew up in the Netherlands with a certain type of background, you may be used to a specific type of meal, a specific type of food, and you will not necessarily accept other types of food very easily because they don't fit into your diet. They don't really, I don't know, satisfy you from nutritional perspective. Also, like you might not feel full, you might not feel I don't know, satisfied with your meal. And you can adapt these things over time, but like a lot of issues that we face today when changing dietary habits of people is that we do not necessarily take culture enough into account. So basically, well, how do we try and change the food system that's currently happening and make it more sustainable? Because there are a lot of challenges that we're facing today, and we will see a bit more in the following slides. What are these challenges? But the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations recognizes that food is at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals and is actually like closely linked to all these different goals and impacts them. So there are clear links, for example, with the second goal, which is related to, well, zero hunger, but it also impacts other things like life on land, life below water, and even things such as the quality education, because nutritious food is critical to learning. At least that's what like scientific research shows. So tackling like food and agricultural issues may really help us to improve like sustainability aspects. But then let's look, what are the challenges that we're facing today within the current context of the food system? And there are a number of challenges I want to like outline today. So basically, let's start with some social challenges related to health. Food is tightly connected to our health and causes illnesses and diseases. So there are a few main threats to health, which is product contamination and decay. So it relates to the food safety issues and product degradation. And there is unhealthy eating patterns and malnutrition. So when we're talking about food, we always want to talk about what is a healthy consumption and how can we meet the nutritious demand of our customer. So with regards to the first aspect, food quality and safety, food is generally highly regulated and needs to meet specific quality and safety standards. And there are a number of safety hazards that we can consider. So first of all, there can be physical safety hazards, such as foreign objects in food, which could be metal, fragments, glass, plastic, and so on. All of this we want to avoid. At the same time, there could be chemical issues, chemical safety hazards, such as agricultural pesticides, toxins that are being used, food additives, medications, and alcohol that we do not want in our food, but there may be traces of it in many products. Then there's microbiological safety hazards like bacteria, parasites, viruses, and fungi. A lot of these things are related to the degradation of food as well, and like this may increase over time, like throughout our supply chain, that we experience bacteria growth or fungi growth, or like because products get contaminated. And last but not least, there are allergenic safety hazards. So this is mostly related to common food allergies, such as peanut allergies and intolerances. So this is something important to take into account, because basically, if we have a certain customer, we do not want them to have an allergic reaction to our products. So one of the main issues with regards to malnutrition or non-communicable diseases, for example, are obesity and these non-communicable diseases that are related to our dietary input. So we can see that, for example, 30% of the adults in the world are obese and 39% of adults are overweight. And there are a number of diet-related non-communicable diseases, such as diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, stroke, and cancer. So if we can adapt our dietary consumption, then we can also prevent these diseases from happening and ensuring that our population overall is healthier. Now, moving on from the societal or social challenges, there are a number of environmental challenges. The first one, I'm sure that you are all aware of, it's emissions. We all talk about greenhouse gas emissions. And agriculture is actually the largest contributor of non-CO2 greenhouse gas emissions. And food systems emissions contribute about 19 to 29% of total greenhouse gas emissions. So it really has a large contribution. Out of the contribution of the food system, a lot of it is actually not related to the supply chain. You can see here it's only 18%, but most of it is actually made up of agricultural production, livestock and fisheries, and land use. So actually the supply chain activities only have a really small impact, and most of it happens before. And livestock has a very big impact on this. So the type of products that we consume actually have an impact on the emissions of our diet. Then another challenge that we're facing is related to land. So basically, through our agricultural practices, there is a lot of soil degradation and erosion that's happening, and that leads to desertification. And it also leads to the destruction of ecosystems. So basically, the causes for this are deforestation to make room for agricultural land, too much fertilizer usage, which kind of erodes the soil, and the land use intensity. So we just keep doing the same thing over and over and basically take all the nutrients out of the land. And again, this type of the impact varies per product. So we can see, for example, that land use intensity is very high for animal products, and lower for certain types of plant-based products such as tofu or peas or so on, just because we need a lot more input in terms of feed material and so on, and that requires a lot more land use. Another challenge related to the land use is biodiversity. So basically, due to the loss of land and the destruction of ecosystem, we have a lot of loss in natural ecosystems and habitat loss. We bring invasive species into these ecosystems, which again destroy other species, and we overharvest or overfish, for example. In addition, we only use a very small amount of species within our agricultural production. So there's an agricultural biodiversity loss. And that leads to a loss in resilience and the ecosystem functions because, for example, we lose a lot of the microorganisms in the soil, and then our soil becomes less healthy and so on. And that leads to increased risks of pests and diseases overall. Next challenge is water. So there's a lot of water depletion happening in the food system, which leads to droughts. In addition to this, there's eutrophication. So basically, we have too much fertilizer in our water, a lot of algae that's growing, and so on. Our water is less healthy, and pollution of our water as well. And causes for this is a lot of irrigation, for example, that then leads to the depletion of water, and the pesticide and fertilizer usage that then goes into groundwater and pollutes it. And then one of the last challenges we're facing is the food losses and waste within the chain. So while we're taking a lot of resources out of the environment, we're actually not using them efficiently. We're kind of wasting a lot of it on the way. So we have food loss, which often we refer to as a decrease in quantity or quality of food resulting from decisions and actions by suppliers in the chain. And then we have food waste, which we often refer to as a decrease in quantity or quality of food resulting from decisions and actions by retailers, food service providers, and consumers. So basically, the difference is on where these things happen in the chain. And these things may also be used interchangeably, just in case you get confused if you look into the literature or so. But basically, a lot of food is wasted within the chain. So like 1/4 to about 1/3 of all the food produced for human consumption is lost. So if you can imagine that, like, we take all these like environmental impacts into account first, and then we just throw it away, that is like really not helping the situation. And again, we can also see like there's differences here with regards to the type of product on what is wasted more and what's wasted less. So for example, we waste a lot of fruit and vegetables in the chain because, like, well, they get bruised, they don't like fulfill certain requirements or so on, and we just throw them out instead of actually making use of them. So the question is, how can we get to a more sustainable food system and overcome?
Oh, I think we lost Sonia. Okay, you're here again.
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear us? Yeah. Sonia? Sonia?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You? Okay, good. Yeah.
What was the last thing that you heard me say?
So if you go back to your...
I can't hear you currently.
Ah, you cannot hear me?
No.
What about the rest?
I can hear both of you.
Is that the slide that we were on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. I'll try to get back to it.
Oh, is she completely gone now? Yeah, we're back. I only see Margot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. It's not a lucky day today, guys. We. Okay. There, she's back. Okay, wait. Connection problems. Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Is it working now?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Good. I can hear you again as well. This is
okay.
Great. I'm so sorry.
No, these things, yeah,
happen.
It's okay. Okay, so we were at slide 26, I think.
Yeah, I think it was this one,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically the question is, how can we make our food system more sustainable and overcome some of these challenges? And well, there's ways that we can change, for example, our food production by, well, changing the agricultural production inputs, such as like switching to more like, well, to different kind of species, optimizing irrigation, managing like the soil and nutrients and erosion a bit better. So we're kind of like just focusing on different types of varieties that we will use in our production settings. Again, we can also change our production practices and methods and try and adapt them in a way that they are like less resource intensive. And then we can also change our maintenance and control and monitor our systems maybe a bit better in order to, again, use less resources, maybe use less fertilizer and things like this. So changing our production practices in agriculture, there's actually a lot of innovative concepts that are being developed, such as vertical farming, urban farming, and pixel cropping. A lot of these concepts allow us to kind of like, well, use spaces better and also make it more flexible where we can, well, grow our food. So we can, for example, urban farming makes use of roof spaces where we can now try to grow lettuce and other vegetables and then reduce actually the distance that food needs to travel from the field to the final consumer. Vertical farming, again, makes use of better space. And pixel cropping is an agricultural technique that combines different products and actually takes advantage of plant interactions so that these the growing conditions for the individual plants are improved. And at the same time, the soil is less, kind of degraded because there's just one crop on it that takes all of one nutrient out of the soil. In addition to this, there is a lot of innovative technology and automation happening within the context of food. So we're working on how we can grow meat within a lab environment from individual cells. So that may actually help with the emissions related to meat and so on. We're working on how we can print food using 3D printer technology. We're using drones within agricultural settings, but also we're considering the use of drones in the last mile delivery, for example. And we're making more and more use of robotics also within agricultural settings, but processing plants and so on. So all of this makes it easier to monitor and really have very precise conditions and track things better and automate things. Then we can think of changes in food processing by using different inputs for processing, such as the quality of ingredients, making more efficient resource use within this context. We can, for example, also think of what quality does an ingredient need to have? Do we need to have everything in a certain standard, or is it fine to have a lower standard maybe of tomatoes if I want to make it into a tomato paste anyway later on? Then there's technological innovations such as nanotechnology and precision and automation, as mentioned before already, which makes it easier to track things and make things more precise. And then there's changes that we can make with regards to recipes and the composition of food. So we can, for example, introduce substitutes and replacements of products, such as it is now done more and more with regards to meat replacers. So we're designing new products that are capable of replacing certain components within our diets, and that may actually have a lower environmental impact. And then we can change storage and handling of products by optimizing the conditions and better control these conditions, so that, for example, we may have less waste in the end, by changing the sequencing of processing steps. So maybe I don't wash things like right in the beginning, but I wash them later on because otherwise I have to do them, like wash them several times. Or maybe if I package things like at an earlier time or like can them very early on in the chain, then I may prevent waste later on, or like I may have to cool things less like over the chain or things like this. And we can introduce more sensors and tracking of products so that we are more aware of like the quality and well, specific issues of the handling and the conditions that are being kept. Then another thing that we can change is packaging choices. So we can overall reduce and optimize packaging. In this context, it's always important to keep in mind that, well, packaging also has a protective function. So it might not always be better to just remove all packaging, but maybe we can use more sustainable materials or introduce also smart food packaging. So in this context, again, there's like the development of nanotechnology and sensors that can indicate better when a product is actually, I don't know, expiring. So for example, in the case of meat, there's specific labels that are being developed that can track the microbial count and then indicate whether the meat is good or already bad. And this may help to kind of like, well, give a better indication of the product is, well, purged, and then like avoid that the product is being thrown out too early. And then we can, of course, change our food distribution and adapt the chain. So we can move towards shorter chains to link our, well, final customer better with like the initial stages in the chain, reduce food miles, and kind of like know better of the origin of our product. And we can create like better, like different types of marketplaces and so on that make things more accessible to people, and maybe also avoid waste because products can be, well, allocated to other things in a more dynamic nature. The goal of this is often to shorten the link between production and consumption and basically bring things closer together. This is also related to just having fresher products and keeping the nutrition within the product for longer. Other changes in food distribution are more related to the transportation, for example. So we can think about consolidation through either horizontal or vertical collaboration of different actors in the chain by, for example, combining pickup and deliveries within the chain so that we don't have empty vehicles going around, but we combine. If like one truck has to go a certain way, then they can also pick up maybe some other things on the way rather than just like going there empty or returning empty or things like this. And we can, well, think about the mode choice. So maybe use some more sustainable modes of transport, like very futuristic, maybe drones, or maybe just, I don't know, bicycles or solar powered vehicles or whatever. And we can look into intermodal transportation. So instead of just doing everything by truck, we change transportation mode a couple of times. And by doing this, we actually like get a better environmental impact. And again, here we can also consolidate freight so that we don't have to have 100 different trucks, but we just like, I don't know, put everything on a boat, and that's cheaper and maybe more environmental friendly. Then again, there's innovative concepts as well that are popping up related to, well, technology, development and automation. So we have more and more self-driving vehicles, locker boxes that pop up in cities where you can store food for a while until the customer picks it up. Different last mile delivery concepts with like bicycles and like different types of vehicles that are being used. Also with regards to the cold chain distribution, we're getting better and better with like the type of technology that we're using. And then in addition, again, we can make use more of data and the physical internet by better tracking the products and like using that information, the data that we gather throughout that process for the quality control of products, and gain more real-time information regarding certain transportation conditions, the cooling of products, where is the product at a specific point in time, and so on. And that allows us to then also make better use of resources and share resources amongst each other, because if we're able to track where a truck is at a specific moment and we know that there's still space in the truck, then maybe we can add some additional products into that truck. There is a number of examples from last mile food distribution that already makes use of alternative forms of transport, like more and more like bicycles or e-bicycles that are being used for the meals that you receive at home, which is better within a city environment to deliver things. There is these locker boxes where people can pick up their produce. So it's basically a container that is cooled where produce can be stored for a certain amount of time, and that gives people access without anybody having to handle it or serve the customers or so on. And there's like all these kind of like different type of boxes that we can now receive in like a last mile setting, like for example picnic, where you just order like your groceries online and then you receive it in a very short amount of time. With regards to food consumption, there are also a number of changes that are happening, such as personalized nutrition. So we're recognizing more and more that people actually have different dietary and nutritional requirements, and we can now kind of like fine-tune these things a bit more towards like the person or the individual. We're looking more and more into product replacements and substitutes, kind of like attempting a protein transition, so using less meat, as the environmental impact of meat is generally rather large, and switching more to plant-based products. There is more and more kind of like things related to the packaging and storage of product, to avoid deterioration of products over time and also avoid nutrient decay and waste, is in particular at the final stage or at the household level, because that's of course where most value has been added to the product as well. So if we're losing things at the consumption stage, then we're basically wasting everything that's been added into or put into the product beforehand. So all the environmental input that has been caused is just been like thrown out, and we're not making any use of it. And well, then we're kind of like, we can somewhat try and rethink the preparation of products at the household stage or the consumption stage, so that it's easier to use less resources in that process. So for example, I need less water to cook certain things, or I need less energy because things are really quickly like cooked. So for example, if I put a plant-based sausage in the pan, it takes way less time to cook than if I cook an actual like meat sausage because it needs more energy and it needs to cook through thoroughly and stuff like this. And also maybe if I can like change the preparation in such a way that I can create less waste in the system. And last but not least, so we can think of how can we reduce our food waste and the losses in the system. And there's different things that we can consider here. So we can, well, first reduce the like food waste at the source, or the food loss and waste at the source, so the entire volume that's being generated, by preventing it from happening in the first place. Then we can also try and redistribute these things instead. So before they're being wasted, we're just kind of like using them at food banks, at soup kitchens, at shelters. There's concepts like Too Good To Go, where people use an app to save food before it's being thrown out. We can repurpose things or recycle things by using them in animal feed or in industrial production steps or fertilizers. We can, well, use anaerobic digestion to recycle things, or composting. And then like the last thing that, well, we can do to dispose things is like incineration or using the landfills. But this is really the part that we want to avoid. So ideally, we want to prevent or reduce things in the beginning, and otherwise try to repurpose it in a way that we still gain value from all the things that we've created beforehand. Okay, I think this is it from my side.
Thank you.
I will try to stop presenting. I hope this was informative.
Yeah, I hope too. We actually have one question from Lucas. So I don't know if you would like to pick this up. Maybe Lucas can ask this question himself, actually. Would be nice. Hey.
Hi.
We cannot hear you.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Amazing. Great. So first of all, thank you very much for this very, very informative, almost a bit of an information overkill for me. But I mean, it's recorded, so I can go through that again. So you talked about vertical farming, and I wanted to know if there's a generalizable environmental assessment of vertical farming, because like when you build up and then you build like also in what, then you need to get light in the middle of the cube that you're building, so you need a greater infrastructure. So is it actually like desirable then in comparison to, I don't know, organic farming or whatever?
My general thing on this is that it depends on the indicator that you're looking at. So like, as you see, there's a lot of different challenges, and it's really hard to actually optimize for all of them. So basically the situation that you will end up with is often, so vertical farming is great with regards to space usage, for example, right? But it is a very controlled environment, and you might have to use like more light, more energy kind of input. And that may have other implications on your system. So it's really hard to give you a one-off answer and say, no, it's great. It also depends on the product itself. So what type of product you want to grow. And in a way, you can also say, okay, sometimes it's actually good to have a very controlled environment, even though you have to put more of certain resources in, you might need less of other resources. So trade-offs.
Okay.
And
yeah,
this
so
is one of the most important thing is consider these trade-offs.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Indeed, I think it was a lot of information, but we tried to, this is something we discussed with Sonia before, that it is going to be a lot of information for you, but we tried to offer you an overview. And yeah, maybe if you have questions, Sonia, should they contact you, or how do you think we should go with that?
I think they can like contact me. Like, I'm happy to talk to you guys and like see what you are thinking. If there's any, I know this was a lot of information and I'm sorry to bombard you with all of this. I wanted to just like let you see kind of like, well, all the different aspects that there are, and there's a lot. But maybe it's good if you have like a specific topic that is very interesting to you, or where you say, okay, this is maybe where I want to focus on a bit more, then just, well, reach out to me and let me know, and we can maybe even have a small discussion about it or things like this.
Yeah, so as a team, right? Because yeah, I can imagine also your time is limited. Yeah, and also this session is being recorded, and we're going to share it with you. Yeah, I hope it was it was really interesting for me. It was a lot of new information as well. But thank you so much for your time and for all these inputs. Are there any questions? Okay, so if there are no more questions, maybe you can take your time to think about it. If there are questions as a team, reach out to Sonia with specific input that you would like. And we will see you all next week again. On Tuesday, there's an office hour, and there's going to be a student from the ACT group sharing their experience, if you would be interested. Or on Thursday, there's another session. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Good with time, even though the technical difficulties. And we keep in touch.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.